everyone, Mr. Davis here. This is the second of our lessons on fitness testing. Can you make sure that you've got your book open and purple pens ready for the starter task? I'd like you just to reflect on the work that we did last week and go through each of these questions and just make sure that you've got an answer down in your book. Ideally, you do this without looking back at the work that you did last week, but if you absolutely have to, then by all means do. Pause the video here and record an answer for each of the 6 questions. Thank you. Okay, we'll go through these one at a time. So the fitness test used to measure power. That is the vertical jump test. Obviously it focuses on leg power, but that is the test that you need to put down for that question. The fitness test used to measure flexibility. That one is the sit and reach test. Identify the distance the performer stands from the wall during the test for coordination. Now, often people get this mixed up, but the distance you should be standing from the wall is 2 meters. Often people put 1. Correct answer is 2 meters from the wall. Total number of cones required to complete the test for agility. You're obviously not going to get a question quite like this in the exam, but it does show that you've got a good understanding of how the test is done. So the correct answer is 8. There's 4 on the outside, essentially in a square, and then 4 more that run down the middle when you slalom in and out. The fitness component being tested during the sit-up beat test is muscular endurance. And the fitness component being tested during the stalk stand is balance. Can you make sure that you tick off any answers that you've got correct in purple pen, any that you've made a mistake on, and make sure you've got the right answer written in. Okay, moving on. So this is what we're looking at in today's lesson. So title, learning objective and keywords, please make sure that they're neatly recorded on the page, underlining the title. And the learning objective, I will learn the pros and cons of fitness testing to help evaluate their suitability in sport. And then 4 keywords that I'd like you to make a note of. We will go through exactly what they mean throughout this presentation, but you need to make a note of them here. It's limitation, suitability, qualitative, which is harder to say than it is to write, and quantitative, which is equally harder to say than it is to write. But make sure you've got each of those words written down. And then once you've done that, what we're going to do is we're going to go through the work that you did from the last lesson. And in each of the slides that follows, it details the breakdown of how each test is completed or administered. And what I'd like you to do is tick off any of the correct information that you've got included, and then add anything else in that you may have missed. Okay. Please make sure that your summary of each test is written in bullet points. Okay. Much more efficient way of recording your answer for this sort of question. So if you haven't done that, can you just adapt it and try and make it as concise and short as possible without obviously leaving out key information? I might not read through absolutely everything, but I will highlight key points that you need to make sure that you are thinking about. So for the first one, the Illinois agility test measures agility. Now, first thing I'm going to say, for this sort of question, I'm always going to put down completes a suitable warm-up because that's part of the process. You might not get the mark for it, but it's such an easy point to make. On a good day, in some mark schemes, you do get a mark for it. So I would always have that down. Having said that, if it's a 3-mark question, you're asked to record how the test is completed and it's 3 marks, I would write that down. And then in addition, I'd write 3 additional things. So I wouldn't put warm up down as one of my 3. I'd put that down just because it takes 5 seconds to write that down. But then I'd go through. And the process that you should be thinking about for this, just to make it nice and straightforward, is what can I do? What comment can I make about the starting position, or maybe something to do with the setup of the test? Something about the start. Then something about how the test is completed, like what you actually do during the test. And then a comment at the end. So your third and final comment about how the result is recorded. Without that, it's just, fun and games. It's just throwing a ball against the wall or running around a set of cones. You have to actually record something for it to be a test. So bear that in mind as we go through each of these 3 things, at each of these fitness tests. So in this one, your starting position is that you're face down in a press up position. You then, while it might look complicated, you're essentially just running through a sequence of cones in the correct order as quickly as you can. Now, in this particular test, you would get credit for drawing out a diagram. You obviously have to have a very clear idea of how the test is completed to do that. It's 4 cones in the middle. So you run straight up and then straight back down towards, so it's from here, straight up, straight back down. Think of it like an M shape, sort of. You then slalom in and out and slalom in and out again. And then you finish off the M by going up this cone and then back down again. Similar to an M, yeah? But essentially, rather than saying you run up 10 meters to the first cone, then you run back down, and then you slalom in and out of this cone, and slalom in and out of that cone, and then you run up again. That's quite long-winded. Just say that you run through a sequence of cones in the correct order as quickly as you can. And then the time is recorded in seconds. So you record how long it takes you to do it and compare it to normative data. Normative data is just a fancy way of saying other people's scores. National data is another way of saying it. It's essentially a judgment of where your score adds up to against other people that have done the test, like the millions of people that would have done the test. Is it average? Is it above average? Is it excellent? Is it below average? So somewhere in that scale. And for this test, there'll be a time that you'll have to be judged against. And from that, you can then judge kind of where you sit in there, whether it's a good score or not. You don't know straight away. You have to compare it to the data. So starting position, something about the middle, and then something about the result. 3 marks, easy. Next one. Okay, this is quite a tricky one to describe. And the key thing that I won't go through everything, but the key thing that people get mixed up is when the test begins, when you rise up onto the heel. It should be the ball of your standing foot. So essentially, I mean, some people would say that you should go up onto your tiptoes. It's not onto your tiptoes, so that would be wrong as well. It's the ball of your foot, so just kind of a bit back from your tiptoes. That's when the test begins. It's not just standing on one foot, but it's actually rising up onto the ball of that standing foot here. Okay, that's the key thing with this one. And then obviously you measure it. Anything like that is going to get you marks. Even a comment about the hand position, resting your hands on the hip, that's going to get you marks. So just go through each of those points. It doesn't have to be word for word what I've written, but something about the start, something about how it's done, and then something about the result. The wall toss test. So again, something about suitable warm up. This is the easiest thing to say about this. 2 meters from the wall, throw it with one hand, catch it with the other hand, and repeat, alternating the hands. Again, in terms of kind of information, you can include 30 seconds it's done for, and you count the number of successful catches within that time and compare it to normative data. 3 easy points. 30-meter sprint. Okay, so the key thing with this one, obviously the cones are 30 meters apart that you're going to run between, but in terms of a start, it's a flying start. So you can see how this works here. Essentially, you're moving. You're not starting here like in a 100 meters race and then just running towards the end. You start way back here. You start running, you build up speed, so you're actually flying through the start line, not literally, but you're at full speed, and it's how quickly you can cover that distance of 30 meters. You record your time and compare it to normative data. You see a common feature there. Having that mark, that comment at the end is an easy one because you can use it for any of the tests. Whether you just got to say whether it's a time or a distance or a number or a level, but you compare your score to normative data. The 1 rep max test. Hey, this can be done on different exercises and techniques, but the standard one is bench press if you're testing your upper body strength. Okay, and the key thing is it's 1 lift, just 1 repetition, and you can either perform it, in which case you put the bar back and then you add more weight on, or you hit a point where you can't do any more. And the point at which you can't do any more, that's when you stop and you record the last weight that you could do, so the heaviest single repetition that you could lift, and then you compare it to normative data. Multi-stage fitness test, more commonly known as the bleep test or the beep test, either one that you would get credit for. But I know from the last time an exam was completed, a question referred to it as the multi-stage fitness test, and loads of people just got completely baffled by it because they hadn't understood that that was an alternative name for the beep test. Okay, cones 20 meters apart. Key thing with this one is that it gets progressively quicker. Okay, so you're not just running and repeating a 20-meter jog, it gets quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker. And it's the point at which you can't continue, or you can't make it to the end of the 20 meters. You record the last level that you got to and compare it to normative data. Flexibility test, sit and reach test. Okay, so you sit on the floor, legs flat, feet against the box, shoes off. Try and be quite clear with that information. So you're not just sitting down. That doesn't really clarify the starting position, but it's sit on the floor, legs together, flat on the floor, feet up against the box, shoes off, because people might have different sizes of the kind of the sole of the shoe, so it's going to influence. If you've got a massive sole on your huge Nike Air pumps, that's going to push you further back, whereas if you've got plimp soles on, it's obviously going to be much thinner. Now this one I've put in red because even though it's important that you understand that this is a key part of the test, sometimes the distance here is different. Okay, so it's not necessarily a point that I would look to make. So what they're basically saying is, if you've got really bad flexibility, and if the ruler starts here and you can't actually reach your toes, you're going to end up with a negative number. And you never really want to deal with negative numbers when you're dealing with fitness testing. So the idea is the ruler actually starts a little bit further back. Here is 0. So even if you can't reach your toes, assuming you can reach, your ankles, that's going to get you a positive number, 5 centimeters, for instance, and it might be 10. And at this point in this particular example, it might be 15, I should say, centimeters, 15. Yeah, just to be super clear with it. Often, although you might have found on the research that you did, it's a different number, but 15 centimeters is often. So if you can reach your toes, your score here is going to be 15 centimeters, not 0. Anyway, moving forward, 2 hands together, you reach as far as possible, but not bouncing, and your score is recorded in centimeters, as I've said there. Then you compare it to normative data. Okay. In theory, this is one of the tests where if you repeated it over a period of time, like 2, 3, 4 times, as your muscles start to become a little bit more pliable, essentially you're increasing your flexibility because you're stretching. You might find that you actually do better the more times that you do it, which is why it's important that you record on which attempt you actually made your score on. Because if someone's done it 10 times, they're more likely to get a good score than someone who's just done it off their first go. Again, that's the importance of doing a warm-up as well, because if you don't warm up, you're not going to be very flexible or pliable, and that's going to affect your score. Okay, so the consistency of that is important, and we'll come back to that a little later on. Muscular endurance, the sit-up bleep test. Okay, so in a similar way as the bleep test or the multi-stage fitness test for cardiovascular endurance, it's done on a CD player. It's like a set recording, and every time it beeps, you have to maintain the quality of performance on a sit-up. You can have a partner holding your ankles for support. Essentially go up on the beep and then back down again. It does get progressively quicker, just like the other one, and then you have to record the number of sit-ups that you complete during the test and then compare it to normative data. Power is the vertical jump test. So again, key thing with this is it's side on to the wall. And people get this mixed up. It's not just how far you can jump up. That's not the test. The key thing with this is that you reach up initially and mark that position on the wall. You then bend down, jump up, and mark another position on the wall. The thing that you measure is the distance between the original mark and the second mark. And the bigger that distance, the better you've done on the test. So even if you are quite a small person and that's as high as you can reach, if you then jump up here, even though that's not as high as the other person, that distance is much bigger. So it shows that you've got more power in your legs. So that's the key thing with this test. Okay, so you're measuring the distance between the two marks. Record it in centimeters, compare it to normative data. Okay, so just to be clear, once you've go through each of those really carefully, make sure that your notes are reflective of the information that I've included on my notes. Make sure it's in bullet points. Anything where there's like a number involved, like 2 meters from the wall, completed for 30 seconds. And then obviously the easiest one is compared to normative data. Score is recorded and compared to normative data. That's the easiest mark you're going to get in the exam. Okay, so moving on. This is the key thing we're really looking at today, or it builds into it. Reasons for fitness testing. So one way to think about this is, imagine you've just signed for a new football club, but the coach doesn't really know much about you. They don't know if you're that good a player. They don't know what your levels are like. So make a list of the reasons why you might be asked to perform a range of fitness tests having just joined this club. How is that going to help? How is it going to help you? How is it going to help the coach? What's it going to tell them? Okay, pause the video here. Try and come up with at least 3 or 4 different reasons why you might be asked to do all of these fitness tests. Okay, so we're going to go through a few of them now and just check against the ones you've got and add any others in that you may not have got. So the first one, I've kind of done these in a specific order, so it's worth thinking about the order that I've done it in, and then you might want to just realign the ones that you've done. So the first thing is, if you do a range of tests, just like you would do at school, you're going to identify your strengths and weaknesses. You're going to realize that you're good at maths and that you're strong at English, but your science is weak and your geography is weak. So you're going to identify those strengths and weaknesses. Remember, that's the key thing, is like it's based on your levels relative to where they should be. It's going to show you a starting level of fitness, an overall general level of fitness, but also for each of those things. So if you think about the fitness components that are particularly important for that sport, so for instance, power in relation to jumping is going to be important for basketball. That test result is going to be really, really important to tell the coach and to tell you whether you've got good power in your legs or not. But it's a starting point. So it's strengths and weaknesses across the board, lots of different strengths, lots of different weaknesses. It then shows you a starting level of fitness. So whether that's a good thing that you want to get even better at, or something that needs to be good but isn't actually very strong at this stage, gives you that starting level or a baseline level. From that, it can then inform future planning or future requirements of training. So once you know where your levels are at, what is it then that you can do to try and improve? Oh, right, I'm a basketball player and my power's not very good. I need to start working on it. What can I do? Right, it might be some sort of weight training I can do. It might be some sort of plyometric training, which is something that we'll look at over the next few weeks. It might be some cardio because you're carrying some excess weight and you need to shift a bit of weight to help you make it easier for you to jump, but it informs the future planning for your training. It helps to set goals. So once you know what your baseline level is, you can then say, okay, everyone else in this team is at a certain level and I'm not there yet. That can be my level for, in 6 weeks, I'm going to test myself again and see where I've got to. So it helps you set specific goals, not just a shot in the dark. Oh, I think I should get to level 15 on the bleep test. Well, if you're already at level 14.5, level 15 isn't actually that much of an increase. Whereas if your level is only level 8, level 15 is way in advance of what you're really capable of doing at the moment or anytime soon. So it has to be, you know, a suitable target. Setting the goals. Obviously, once you've set the goals, it then helps you to monitor the improvement. So you could repeat the test again in a few weeks during that plan. So you're right, this is where I should be at this stage. Yes, I've started to make improvement. Or this is where I should be at this stage. No, it's still not improving. I need to do something different. I need to work a bit harder. Fitness testing can also be used as a means of motivation. So once you've got that target, it really does kind of push you on. If you want to, for instance, beat your best time in a 10-kilometer run, having an actual target, so you know what your previous time was, is going to push you along. Otherwise, you don't know what you're really working towards, and it's difficult to say, oh, I really want to get better. It's just too general to say I want to get better. You say, oh, I'm really looking to knock 12 seconds off my best time. That's going to be a real motivating factor. Fitness testing also helps to compare your performance to others and against national averages. So that national or normative data. If you're a county level football player and similar ability players might be at, say, level 12 on the Bleak test or the multi-stage fitness test, that's something that you should be looking to achieve as well, or maybe improve on to show that you're a better player than the others. Within a football team or a basketball team, you could compare your levels. If your levels are that much better, then maybe you're more likely to start the game. If your levels are that much worse, then they're not likely to start the game. Jose Mourinho was talking today about one of his players, saying when he first came to the club, they could see he was a good player, but his conditioning, his fitness just wasn't as good as it should be. And that's why initially he didn't play him. But this season he started to play a lot more. And it's largely down, they always knew he was a good player, but it's largely down to his fitness improving. And finally, it can be just used to add variety into the training. So something a bit different. Let's do a series of fitness tests. Let's mix it up a little bit. It's something a bit different from what we've been doing before. Makes it more interesting, stops people getting bored. It's a key phrase that we'll look at in due course, which is called tedium, which is just a fancy way of saying boredom. You don't want to get bored with your training. If you get bored, you won't put as much effort in, and then you're not going to improve as much. So it avoids tedium or boredom. So just make sure you've got those listed down. Hopefully you can see the reason why I've done it in this order, because this is the starting point here. That links into that, to that, to that, to that, to that, to that, and to a certain extent to that one as well. But these are the key ones here that kind of link in together in terms of a process. Make sure you've got those listed down. Second part of that is to do with the limitations of fitness testing. So yeah, you've got the reasons why you do them, but on this time, say you've just signed for this club again, make a list of reasons why performing a test might not enable the coach to make an accurate judgment about your ability level. So what are the fitness tests? We're not stating that they're no good. Doing fitness tests in sport is always going to be beneficial. It's always going to have some sort of useful information from it, but it's not going to tell you everything. And if it's not done correctly, it's not going to prove as useful as it could be. So what are the reasons why performing the test might not enable this football coach to make a good judgment about you? What's it not going to tell them? And maybe why isn't it going to tell them that? Pause the video here, make a list of at least 3 or 4 things, and we'll pick it up on the next slide. Okay, so using that as a subheading, let's just go through these. These are maybe a little bit more tricky to get your head around, but we'll go through them. Okay, so I'm going to try and highlight the ones that you're not going to get asked to comment on like 6 different things, although I'm going to list as many as I think are kind of relevant, but you can just pick out the 2 or 3 which you think, yeah, I'm definitely going to remember that, and that makes sense for me. So the first one, the tests don't measure skills required in the sport. None of the tests measure skills, they measure fitness, and it's useful, but it's not going to tell you anything about how skillful the player is. It might tell you that they've got excellent cardiovascular endurance, and that's really important in your sport. It might tell the basketball coach that you've got excellent power, which in theory would help you with jumping in basketball, which is a great thing. But that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to dribble or shoot or mark or follow tactical information. So the tests don't measure skills required in the sport. They only focus on fitness. Okay. Now, some people in in their answers just say the tests aren't sport specific. And you can say that, but I would always take on that they don't measure skills. It's not sport specific because it's not specifically linked into the requirements of the sport, the skill requirements of the sport. Okay, the next one, the test might not replicate the movement and intensity of the sport. It might do, but in lots of cases, it may not because of the nature of the test. So for example, the wall toss test is a good test of coordination, and it might particularly be useful for sports where, you know, hand-eye coordination is important. Tennis, table tennis, cricket, things like that, where there's a ball flying around and you may have to, you know, catch it or at least move something towards that ball. But think about how that test is completed. You're standing 2 meters from a wall. You may not move your feet during the entire test. Is that reflective of how you move and the intensity of your movement in a sport like tennis? No, it's not. You don't have to get into the nitty-gritty details about it, but the test might not replicate the movements, or it might not replicate the intensity of the sport. The tests are not sport specific, so to a certain extent that kind of links in to these ones, but you can also say some of the particulars about a sport. It's a little bit more wordy, this one, which is why it's not always my favorite one to do, even though it's quite a common one that people write down, because you have to kind of say why to get the mark. You can't just say it's not sport specific. I'm not giving you a mark for that anyway. Okay, so try and then link it in, give a reason why. I think this is just an easier way of saying it. It doesn't measure the skills required in the sport. Tests don't replicate competitive conditions. So test, yeah, nice and easy. You go into training one afternoon, you do a test. Is that reflective of, you know, the actual competitive situation that you might find yourself in on a Saturday afternoon? It might be that you feel like you're putting in a good stint and lots of effort involved, but generally the tests don't replicate competitive conditions. Always put a little bit more in, which is why you often hear football players say they're short of match fitness. They've done, you know, the gym work and the training. What they actually need is minutes on the pitch, because nothing can replicate that. Okay, and fitness tests generally don't replicate the competitive conditions. These are key ones now as well. The person testing might get the results wrong. They might just do it wrong. If someone's recording it wrong, if someone asks you to do the test in a slightly different way as the previous time, and that method is not correct, then your result is not valid. It doesn't mean anything if you've not done the test correctly. So for instance, on the 30-meter sprint, if you started from a standing start, you're obviously going to struggle more. Your result is not going to be reflective of your performance, especially if you're comparing it to your own performance from, you know, 6 weeks ago when you did a flying start. That's going to give you maybe a distorted result, and it's certainly going to distort it when you're comparing it to other people. So the person testing it, there might just be an error that they make, or it's not done correctly, like you haven't followed the instructions. And then this one is the conditions of the test might not always be the same. So you might do a test indoors, you might do it outdoors. It might be that the equipment's slightly different. For instance, on the 1 rep max, sometimes there might be a little difference in the weights that you use, or the height of the bar, or the weight of the bar. It might be that the tester is different and they just do things slightly differently. For instance, on the vertical jump, you're supposed to do it from a standing start, standing side on. Someone else might say, right, take 1 step into it. So there's lots of different things. It might be that you've just got different footwear on. All of these things might dictate, influence the result. And as soon as that something else is influencing the result like that, it makes the test result unreliable. Now, if it was me and I had to put 2 or 3 down, I'm definitely putting the first one. If it's relevant, I'm definitely putting the second one, and I'm probably going to just put this one. But like I say, you can choose one of the others as well. Hopefully, just pick the one that you're most clear on here. Make sure you've got each of those down. Doesn't have to be word for word, but bullet point them nice and clear, and then we'll move on. right? So this is where you can start to use some of that information in a slightly more complex question, okay? So this is taken directly from a past paper. Read the question carefully. It's worth 3 marks. So what I'd always encourage you to do, I think we looked at this just before lockdown began, is bug the question. B-U-G. B means what? You box the command word. So in this instance, it's discuss. That's what you're being asked to do. So you box it. You then underline the keywords in the question. So in this one, I'm being asked about the vertical jump test, so I'm definitely going to focus on that. It's about suitability for a football player. Okay, so even if you just do that, it's going to help you just focus on what it is that you're looking at, especially if the question's a bit long-winded, right? I know what I'm looking for now. The last thing, the G, is just go over it again. So once you've done that, read through the question again, establish exactly what it is that you need to do, look at how many marks it's worth, and then you can start to think about your answer. I always think that that kind of goes twice, because once you've written your answer, you then just read through the question again and just double check. Yeah, got that, got that, got that. That's how to approach this sort of question, and any question which isn't just identify this or state this, something which involves a bit of thinking. So the actual question, vertical jump test measures leg power, discuss. Now, what does discuss actually mean? Discuss means you can't just come from one side of the argument. You have to have either advantages and disadvantages, you agree or disagree. So in a 3-mark question, you could have it that you have 2 positive points and 1 negative point, or 1 positive point and 2 negative points. You have to have a mixture. You're not going to get all the marks for just saying it's suitable because, it's suitable because, it's suitable because. They'll just take your first 2 marks for that. So on this one, now we've done that, pause the video here, have a go at answering the question. Okay, I know it may not be a question that you're familiar with. Have a go at it, and then we'll go through the key structure. Okay, pause it here, and crack on with the answer, and we'll pick it up again in a minute. Okay, now block these out so we can concentrate on them one at a time. As you can see, what it says submax, that basically means you can't, in a 3-mark question, you can't get more than 2 marks for agree. It might be just 1, and then you go for 2 marks for disagree, or you put 2 agrees and 1 disagree. But you can't just go agree, agree, agree. That's why it's a discussion. Okay, so the first point that you could be making here, now don't worry about the exact wording of it, let's just focus on the general nature of the point. Leg power is a component of fitness needed by football players to perform specific skills. They've not even listed them. I would recommend that you put down a couple of examples, but hey, this is taken exactly from a mark scheme of a past paper. So leg power is a component of fitness needed by a football player to perform specific skills. So you have to make a positive point. You have to. So you could just say, they're not likely to give you a fitness component that's completely irrelevant to the sport. So assuming you can remember the wording here, agility is a component of fitness needed by tennis players to perform specific skills. For example, changing direction. You could put a couple of examples here. Leg power, important in football, wider football players need power for jumping, for accelerating away, for sprints, for moving forward with the ball quickly. But something about some sort of example, even if it's just 1. But my point is, you don't necessarily have to. You can, if you want, just refer to the performance of specific skills. Okay, next one. The test measures the ability to jump up, so appropriate for jumping to head the ball. This is where they've gone in with some of the detail. But if you can get the mark here for this one, for just saying specific skills, I'd just go with that. Then that gets a little bit, you don't have to worry about that one. Then you're looking at a couple of points of disagree, and it's easier to find the points that disagree because fitness tests by their nature are not perfect. measurement of performance. They're useful, but they're not perfect. So the test is not sport specific. So we looked at that phrase before, and they've said why, as it would not test power needed to kick a ball, start a sprint towards the ball. So it says it is useful initially because it's useful for specific skills, but now you're contradicting it, which is fine because you're discussing the answer, but in a separate bullet point. It's not sport specific as it would not test power needed. So in certain instances, whilst the test for power, jumping against the wall is good, but that doesn't test the power needed to kick a ball or to sprint. It only tests, your ability to jump up. So it's not ideal. It's not going to test every element of power. Now, are you going to remember that in the test? Maybe. It's a little bit wordy. Let's see if there's a different one. Does not test many aspects of playing football, e.g. dribbling, marking, equivalent example. It doesn't test the skills. So that was the first one that we looked at on the previous reasons or limitations of the test. So it measures specific skills, that's fine, but it doesn't test, it contributes towards performers performing specific skills, but it doesn't measure the skills. So they've gone with kicking the ball, sprinting, dribbling, marking, things like that here. But it does not measure skills. So I'm definitely going to use that one. Then I need one more. It can be argued that other aspects of fitness are more important. Okay, there are other things that you can comment on, as you can see here. So you can use some of those other points that we'd previously looked at. However, this is quite an easy one to do. And in any evaluation, and a discussion is just a simple evaluation, I would go this point, that it contributes towards performers performing specific skills, but it doesn't measure the specific skills, and then an alternative. My dodgy writing. It could be argued that other aspects of fitness are more important, and then just give an example with a brief reason why. If cardiovascular endurance isn't in the question, just go with that one, because that's the easiest comment to make. Could be argued that other aspects of fitness are more important. For example, cardiovascular endurance, because you need it to maintain performance towards the end of the game. That's the easiest point to make, and that will get you 3 marks. Okay, go over that again if you're not clear on what the 3 points are. Because moving on, you've now got 5 questions to answer here. Okay, do them all in bullet points. Read through the question carefully. You don't have to write out the question, but can I suggest have that as the subheading, and then just note down the test name and the sport, because that will just put it into a little bit of context, and then you can just go bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. So think back, what are the 3 bullet points you're going to make? Something about the contribution towards specific skills, performing specific skills, something that you're disagreeing now and saying that the test doesn't measure specific skills with examples, and then an alternative with some good reason. That's what you're looking for here. Okay, and we will review the answers next week. So 5 questions, pause the video here, go back to the previous slide if you need to. Make sure you've got 3 bullet points for each one. Okay, and then the last part of the lesson, this is just a particular question that sometimes comes up. It's really easy, but it's got 2 really tricky words in it, and I just want to make it really clear how to answer this question. So when you're evaluating your performance in fitness testing, it could be evaluated, and I'm going to try again to say this carefully, qualitatively. That was better than my first effort, but it could also be evaluated, well, that's supposed to say quantitatively. Quantitatively, it's a really awkward word to say, okay? Qualitative is about opinions, and I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. It's about how you feel you did. Could you have done better? Was it your maximum effort? Do you think you left a little bit out there? Could you have maybe gone again on that bleed test one more time, or lifted one more repetition, or turn that corner a little bit quicker? In your opinion, could you have done it better? That's what qualitative means. Quantitative, that was a better pronunciation, is all about this. So forget that. It's about results, facts, data, statistics. It's about numbers. It's about your actual score. So for instance, on the 1 rep max, I may feel that, yeah, my opinion was that I put my absolute best into it. I couldn't possibly have done any more. That was my opinion, and that's a useful piece of information when I'm evaluating my performance. I couldn't have done any more, in my opinion. Quantitatively, my score was 120 kilos that I was able to lift because I'm super strong. That's an actual number. Obviously, that's the key piece of information when you've completed the test. What score did you get? But the other thing is also important in terms of judging, well, actually, Mr. Davis is really strong and he could have, I heard he could lift 150. So 120 isn't actually that good. So 2 things when you're evaluating. Qualitative is about opinions. Quantitative is about the actual number, the score that you got. So if you look at this, with reference to a named fitness test for cardiovascular endurance, explain how you could evaluate your test performance quantitatively and qualitatively. 3 marks. Bug the question. Explain how you could do it quantitatively, qualitatively, and what's the test for cardiovascular endurance. Okay, name it, and then say, 2nd bullet point, how you can measure it quantitatively. 3rd one, qualitatively. 3 bullet points. Have a go at it. Pause the video here, and we'll check up on the answers in a second. Okay, and this is the breakdown. So it's the multi-stage fitness test, or the BEAT test. That's the most common one. There are others as well. Sometimes people use a test called the Cooper Run, which is a slightly different one, but equally you could do it. This is the most common one to go for though, because you've been given the option of stating the name of the test. If it said already that the fitness test was the multi-stage fitness test, then obviously that's the one you've got to comment on. Now, in terms of the 2 other marks, it's a bit long-winded here, but go through it carefully. Applied knowledge and understanding of quantitative judgment. So for example, the multi-stage fitness test is scored in levels or beeps applied to any suitable test. We're applying it to the multi-stage fitness test. So you would say the performance could be measured quantitatively by recording the score of the level that the performer got to. I got to level 10.5. That's how I would measure or evaluate my performance quantitatively. I would measure it qualitatively by, here we go, an opinion, a feeling that I tried my hardest, I did well, or for instance, maybe I didn't do as well as I could have done. Maybe I gave up too early. Maybe I wasn't motivated. Maybe I was carrying an injury and I was a bit concerned that I would make it worse. But it's my opinion that contributes towards the overall evaluation of the test. So you name the test, you say the test could be measured quantitatively by looking at the level that I got to in this case. And it could also be evaluated or measured qualitatively by assessing my opinion of how well I did on the test. Okay, 3 marks. What you need to do is now do that same process for each of these 5 questions. Okay, and again, if you need to, go back through the previous slides, which just break it down. There's a set answer, a set process that you need here. Look very carefully about how that answer was put together on the previous slide. Make sure you've got answers in bullet points for each of these 5 questions, and we will pick it up again next week by reviewing the processes that you've recorded for your answers here. Okay, right, well done year 10. Make sure you send me that work in, a photo of all of your work today, including the breakdown of those fitness tests. If you've had to purple pen and adjust it, it would be great if you could send me all of it, please, by the end of the week. Have a good one. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.